Hi, welcome to the Divorce Allies podcast, a podcast and video series where we dive into all things divorced, focused on the process of creating a settlement offer with a team of financial professionals, divorce mortgage lending professionals, parenting coaches, and relationship coaches. We cover all the areas of the divorce settlement process from financial to legal to emotional well-being. I'm Melissa Gragg, our financial mediator and business valuator, and I'm here with Emile Flowers, who is our divorce mortgage planning specialist. And we are both part of the Divorce Allies. And today we're talking about empowered divorce and what is your role in the process. How are you this morning, Emily?
I am doing very well, thank you. How are you? I'm so glad I'm here.
I know. So this whole discussion kind of was built off of the fact that this week in the circle, we talked about your team. And your team is kind of like financial, legal, and emotional. And quite frankly, in a really empowered divorce, you have to take control of some pieces of the process, right? And that's a little uncomfortable. And you and I have even been helping a few people
Mhm.
kind of walk through the process themselves. And sometimes that's called pro se, and sometimes that's called self represented. But it's a very uncomfortable space for most people. And really, there's not a lot of people out there helping or champion you to say, yeah, take control of your divorce and you can do some of these things. So where have you kind of like, where do you want to start with this process, or what are some of your thoughts about, the role of somebody in their process?
Yeah, I will tell you that clients that call every day, I mean, 6 times a day, are like, I don't even know what to do next. My attorney isn't doing anything. They're not guiding me. They're not, you know, I don't even know where we're at in this process. We're supposed to have this meeting. I don't even know what the meeting's for or what I'm supposed to do at the meeting. Because there's
Yeah.
like all these court dates or there's, mediation. And they go in there and they don't even know. They just figure somebody's going to take care of it.
Yeah.
And this process has been going on too long. And so my question, I guess, is what do we tell them? Where do we go from here? Because all I know is we have to, you know, advocate for ourselves. But what
Mhm.
does that look like? And what does
Yeah.
that mean? And some things were said in the circle that were mind blowing for me. And one in particular was the legal team, or, is just that. It's just part of an expert. It's not the center.
Yeah.
You are the
Absolutely.
center. Yeah. And that was genius. It was everything to me because it made so much more sense. You're the center. Everybody around you is an expert. And that's never been said before.
Yeah.
Never.
Well, and if we look at the dynamic of, a typical relationship, there could be some coercive control, which is financial over the money, or control over the money that you don't have access to. There could be some abusive patterns. And so typically when women are in this space, they're seeking out this, other person. So they're looking at their spouse as the controller of their world. And then they're looking over here and saying, well, if I hire the attorney, they're going to control this whole divorce process. They're going to protect me. They're going to tell me everything I need to know. They're going to guide me. They're going to be my therapist. They're going to be my financial. They're going to be everything. And a
100%.
lot of times, like, we have to get them to step back and say, okay, you have these three prongs of the divorce, and they're the financial, they're the legal, and they're the emotional. And it's really what we talked about at the beginning was, where do you start? And most people will start at the legal. And once you get started in the legal, it's not like there's no turning back, but you're not necessarily in control. You've hired somebody to take control of this process. You probably show up kind of disheveled, emotionally and even physically, like you're bringing in all these papers and everything's fluffing around and you're just like, I don't know where to start. And they're on the clock. So they're listening and they're doing some things, but you're burning through that first retainer in really areas that they're not best for. And so if you reverse it and say, okay, how do I start with the financial and the emotional and then call in the legal? That's probably going to be a better starting point for the whole process. And we can talk about in each of those areas what part you can play to help that along. But that's probably where we would start, is either emotional or financial, or in the circle, we usually say move both of them forward in some capacity.
I agree with you there. Because some of the, like, if you think about, in my world, the house is both emotional and financial. Absolutely. And so therefore it's a piece of the puzzle that handles a little bit of both, because we're going to have to say why the house, and we're going to have to look at the financials on the house, where it doesn't make sense. Are you comfortable? All the things, right? So it's both. And not that you have to start with the house, but it's not a bad place to start either, because it's a way to move that needle in both directions.
Well, and at the beginning, realistically, and that's why, like, do you start with the financial or the emotional? Well, I think that we would say either one of them is a good start. But financially, a divorce will typically have a house that you have to deal with, right? You may not have like a business valuation or, complicated stock options or you might not even have retirement at this point, right? We see a lot of couples that, and don't feel bad about it. Like, there really is, we're in kind of a situation where people have been maybe spending more than they've been saving. And so this house concept, it is so big of a purview of like, well, if we're not in this house, what are my other options? And what are my expenses? Because at the very beginning, when you hire an attorney, right? Like, let's say you think, oh, I'm going to go hire this attorney. The first steps that they're going to take, and we talk about this, if you go and search pro se divorce in your state, PROSE in your state, you are going to find guides, templates, forms to file in your state, in your county, right? So you're going to the court and the website and saying, okay, how do I file? Even yesterday, I looked at Missouri, and Missouri has like a little program for pro se litigants or self-represented litigants that they have to kind of take some of these little tests and understand the system. But what you have to understand is the system doesn't want you to self-represent. Judges, lawyers are going to tell you this is the most horrible idea ever. Do not do it. You don't know the law. You don't know anything. And that is somewhat true. But if you hired a lawyer, you're going to typically pay $5,000 or $10,000 initially. And what they're going to do is they're going to fill out these forms. And that could mean that they're going to print them from the county, or they have their version of the form. They're literally going to send it to you and say, fill this out, and then we can have our first meeting. And those forms fill out your property statement in Missouri, and your statement of income and expenses. Those are financial things that, quite frankly, that's what we talk about in the circle, is develop your list of stuff. So you have a house, you have 2 cars, you have a bank account. Just start listing them out. I don't care if you write them or what you do with them, but that is the makings of your property statement. So now you've saved yourself time by coming to those meetings with a list of all the things you have. The list needs to be the legal, like the address, the mortgage, where the mortgage is held, what's the account statement. That's why we have templates in the allies to help you start to say, okay, what date is that statement? Because in Missouri, the date of divorce is the date of value. Well, and the date of trial is the date of value. Do you have a trial date yet? No. So you're going to be updating this over and over every time you want to negotiate. And you're either going to pay your attorney to do that. And again, they don't necessarily know numbers, so they're just filling out the form. But then also getting your bank statements together. So if that means going to the bank and having them, give you 12 to 24 months of statements in PDF, right? Not printouts, not copies of it, not pictures, screenshots of it, not down, like you can typically download it online. But again, sometimes people are very, confused. So go to the bank, have them also download as much information. Sometimes it's only 18 months. It could be 24 months or more into Excel. And even if you don't know how to utilize it, just get it into Excel, because that's going to save you so much time and effort with a financial expert. But why are you paying the legal team to come up with the financial stuff at the beginning? And how can you kind of be more active in that? How can they be more active in the house arena as well?
Yeah. So, and I would think of it as like paying yourself instead of somebody else, so because you're going to pocket that money.
This is where time is money.
Yeah, so it is. Time is absolutely money when you're like digging through pro se and stuff. When I was doing my research, it was like, you need to basically, so in Illinois, they're like, you basically need a legal degree to do this. That they were like, you need to learn the law. And I was like, what? You need to learn the law? No, that's so it says that, in your research. So it's no wonder people are confused. But in the mortgage arena, it is current mortgage statement. It's your homeowner's insurance declaration page. People don't understand how important that is. Who's named on it? Because if you're in the house and he's named and something happens in that house, there's a problem. So you've got that. You've got titling information. So maybe a title search, or going back through your paperwork from when you closed on either a refinance or a purchase. Do you have a HELOC or a second mortgage? You may not know. The other person could have taken it out and you signed something that you didn't even know existed. And what is it being used for? So there's like, do you have a homeowners association? Do you pay that? Things like that. So, when we're gathering information for that, and it's income docs too, right? It's W-2s and pay stubs and taxes or award letters for Social Security or pension. There's all those things. And number one, what's the number one? Credit. Let's pull a credit report. You don't know what's on there.
Yeah.
You just don't
credit
know.
Report and your the application for a loan. So a lot of times in the application of any loan, it could be your house loan, like any loan. I'm not even going to go through all of them. Any loan, you typically have to say what you make, what the value is of the things that you have. So like your assets and debts. And quite frankly, when you own a business, typically the business owner is going to report a lot higher, or they're going to report what they really think is in their head, the value. And so if you are unaware of the financial situation, then you got to go back and pull some of these documents. And in my mind, at the beginning, when you're getting divorced, you're like so ready to get divorced. And you're like, what can I do? Okay, this is all that you can do. Collect the documents, load them into a file system, start to organize them in a process so that you can then go to a legal team and have somebody come in, but you've already financially. So then when you pay that first retainer, you're like, look, I already have everything for my property statement, my income and expenses. So you can actually spend that retainer on legal advice and legal things like pushing the subpoenas out. or getting additional documents through the bank and things like that.
Yeah, and getting actual legal advice instead of what happens next, and they're sitting there explaining it for 15 minutes and eating up your time. But I will say that let's say you go back and you get your mortgage loan application. We have to verify all that income.
Yeah.
We have to verify it. So I don't know about other loans necessarily, but if you've done a recent refinance or purchase, that's the income because it has absolutely 100% been verified.
Ooh, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Well, because you don't know on other ones, but you do on that one.
And here's the thing is like, if you're under financial coercive control, which means you don't have access to all of the accounts, you're going to either go to your CPA and your financial planner, if you have them, and say, hey, what have you been talking about each year with my spouse? I would like copies of it. But again, a lot of times you're not aware of things. There's a lot on your tax return that could give you clues to things, but just even collecting the data and starting to get a handle on the financial situation is enough, because you can go, like, I really think you should go to a financial expert first or an emotional coach. And that is, who is on your emotional team is important, because we result to, in a divorce, talking to our mom, talking to our family, our sisters, our brothers, our cousins, our best friends. And we're like, well, what happened in your divorce? And if they're in another state, it's irrelevant. What if they're in another county? Like we have St. Louis County, we have St. Charles County, and St. Charles is more pro males or fathers. St. Louis City is going to be different. You're on the other side in Illinois, and all those counties are different.
Every single one.
Your emotional team. And then what you sometimes will do is use your lawyer as the emotional team, because you're like, well, I'm paying them already, and I see this all the time. Women just going over and over and over all the emotional issues. And the lawyer's like, yeah, I understand. And they're just charging you, and they're not really helping you through the process. So like a divorce coach, although it seems, I think, like, well, why do I really need a divorce coach? They are your guide and keeping you kind of on the rails. Like, yes, let's talk about the emotional side, but like, let's talk about it for 10 minutes. Okay. And then let's move the financial forward. Let's move the legal forward. Like, they're no nonsense. They're not your therapist. They're not your best friend. They are an accountability person, accountability coach, to kind of say, hey, have you gotten those documents? Like, I know you're in a depression. I know that you're, sad every day, but every day I'm going to need you to move something else forward, because it's like those baby steps over time will be like, oh, okay, a month later, you're like, oh, wow, I have all those documents collected. Oh, wow, now I could go to an attorney and actually have a decent conversation. Oh, wow, I've read on my state or on my county all of the things of like, what's the petition? What's the motion to get documents? What's the cooling off period? All of those things. I'm not like, we have YouTube, you have AI. You need to be asking those questions to people that are free.
Yeah.
Or a divorce coach will tell you, hey, don't be focused on that. You need to focus over here. And you're not going to know that if that's your first time getting divorced.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think they help kind of keep you organized as well, which I think is one of the major hurdles, is just staying organized with all the paperwork and where it goes and what it all means. And Chat GPT or another AI source can help explain some of those documents. If you don't understand a tax return, let me tell you, there's somebody online that can explain the entire thing if you are confused. Your bank statements, are you actually looking at every line item? And are there other accounts being named that you don't know about? We gather the information, but we don't always analyze the information because we might be intimidated by the information as well. So then
yeah.
it's going to those sources to explain, to research and get it explained for free.
Well, and just like the house is one of the biggest assets, our most consistent asset that we see, most people may have nothing else, but they have a house or a condo or something like that. The other thing that they always want to know is alimony and child support. And
Absolutely.
alimony is sometimes called maintenance, but all of these are based on your state statutes. And so and there's a list of like, how do you qualify for maintenance or alimony or child support? How is it calculated? And these are all listed in your state resources. And also you can utilize like family law software or a guide that you can download and start to crunch the numbers. Like, what is his income? What is my income? We have 2 kids. What would the supposed calculation be? And a coach is going to help you kind of go through that process and understand, what financial data do you need to then figure out that process, or what could be just a general number. Some states have very specific calculators. Illinois is one of them. It's that calculator is available online, and there's a rubric. How many years are you married is going to determine how many years the maintenance goes. Child support is going to be based on, like, in Illinois, there's a weird little thing that, like, Section 179 depreciation, which is accelerated depreciation, comes back as income that is available for the payment of child support. Now, who the heck is going to know that? So
Right.
every state's going to have their weirdness. And it's not what you see in the movies of, well, I thought that I could have the life that I've grown accustomed to. No, you're not
No.
going to. And the emotional coach or your emotional team is going to help you understand that you may have to go back to work. You may have to find other resources to pay for, and you may have to just be prepared, because the court is not really making you whole, and that's not their goal, is to make you live the lifestyle that you have been grown accustomed to. It is to, based on the statute of the state, that's the rubric of, do you need it? Do you have the capacity to earn it? And what as the life of your marriage, is this a 20 plus year marriage? That's going to be a different rubric than if it's a 5-year marriage. And so knowing some of these things and just kind of running through these scenarios is going to help you emotionally prepare for what your team could eventually tell you from a legal standpoint.
And I think the thing that doesn't get said a whole lot is support is supposed to be rehabilitative, right? Like at least maintenance or whatever, which they just should call it spousal support so that people don't get confused with alimony and maintenance.
Exactly.
Because you're not going to have that lifestyle anymore. If they just put spousal support, it may, click, but it's not meant for a lifetime of you to just sit back and get this money and then not have to move your own needle forward post-divorce for yourself.
Yeah. Well, and that's where, like, alimony and child support are legal constructs. They're dictated by the state statutes, which means you have to understand the statutes, the legal ramifications of what rehabilitative maintenance is or rehabilitative alimony is. And the interesting part is, if you have that emotional team and you have the financial team and you're working, like, you're moving things forward in the financial, you're getting the emotional support every week also. And then after like a month or 2 or 3, depending upon the complexity of your case, you may take this whole thing to a legal team, or we're advocating mediation. And so can you mediate before you go to your legal team? Sure. Can you mediate after you hire? Like, if you go into your legal team and you say, hey, attorney, here's my financial package. I've been working on my summary and getting my emotions kind of in check. I've been working on this overall vision of my strategy, and I want to mediate. Legal team, how can you help me through this? Let's not focus on trial. Let's focus on settling this but I may need some legal advice in order to avoid some potholes, right?
Yeah.
So you're not having them be the savior, but you're having them be part of those three pieces of the team. And now they're saying, well, legally, I would say, let's do these things to be prepared. Let's file, let's get subpoenas, let's get the trial date, let's move those things, because those will actually move a toxic spouse if you have deadlines. So that's the purpose of like the legal process, is to have deadlines around that as well.
Absolutely. No, I mean, brilliant. It just makes so much more sense. And sometimes you can go to mediators that are actually attorneys. Like you can seek them out, or judges, and they will kind of interject into your mediation, like, well, if we were taking this to court, it would kind of look like this. So, they can kind of guide you along the way a little bit, even though it's not meant to do that. And we can go over a mediation another day, because people are very confused by what mediation looks like, because they think
they should ask their legal team going in, do you have mediation experience? Do you understand what I'm looking at? And also you need to ask them, I want to be part of this. I want to save myself time and money. And can I be a part of it? If the lawyer's like, nope, I don't let clients do things, then that might be a no for you. Nope, I don't mediate, like I'm a shark, I'm a bulldog. Okay, that might just be, you've interviewed that person. Make sure you get some legal advice. You could say, okay, well, what legally would you tell me about my case? Because you're going to pay for that first meeting anyway. And then you might say, okay, that's not going to work for me. Now, one thing that you did when you had that meeting with that shark or bulldog is you now have prevented them from being used by your spouse. So that initial meeting, you paid maybe, $300 to $500 to $900, who knows, for that 1 hour, but now they cannot go and hire that bulldog or that shark against you. So that's a benefit, but you need to also understand that if you don't come with a strategy and ask them if you can be a part of that process, then it's just going to start off in a space where the lawyer thinks that they're running the show, and that is typically not the case. You need to have a financial quarterback, and you have to have a legal quarterback, and then you have the emotional person that's supporting you on the outside. So that's kind of the three pieces. And I don't know if that's where we want to kind of leave it, or if you have any final kind of response or remarks to that.
I think that this is a great place to probably stop, but build for future episodes, right? So this start of a conversation can go so deep. And just knowing that you are empowered, and that you don't have to, hire that person, or even if you do, that you can't turn back. I tell women all the time with the house, I'm like, you can make a different decision in 6 months. It doesn't matter. So if you keep the house today, you can sell it in 6 months. It doesn't matter. So no decision is like super duper final. You can make another decision, and it's okay to make a mistake and come back and correct it too in another way. Maybe another option pops up because you made the mistake.
Absolutely. And the more you take control of the process, the more likelihood that you could be divorced in under a year, right? Yeah. And that is not necessarily a short amount of time period, but that's the reality. So if you want something rational, if you want something economical, then you have to figure out what part do you play in the financial, legal, and emotional place, develop a strategy that's consistent and everybody's on board, but that you're kind of leading the strategy, or you're hiring a financial team that's leading the strategy. Because in the legal space, most of this is a financial negotiation, and the mediation is a financial negotiation. Okay. If we're popping out of the court system, we're talking negotiation. And so you have to have somebody that knows the numbers well enough to talk to it, or preps you to get prepared for those conversations. So this is a great conversation. I think that we're going to continue this series and talk about how you can do more. And we'll talk more in each of these places about how you can control the pace. You can do some of the legwork, and it's actually even missing assets And when you think that somebody has spent our marital waste, you can do a lot in that space to help you kind of prove that case. Infidelity, all of these areas need your help, or else you're going to pay 10 to 20 plus $1,000 to have an expert do it. So thank you, Emily. This has been delightful. And we will see you all soon.
I'm so excited. Yeah.